The Philharmonic Hall gleamed under October sunlight, all polished marble and imposing columns. Maya Chen adjusted her glasses and clutched her worn messenger bag tighter as she approached the steps. Around her, musicians streamed in carrying instrument cases of various sizes, their confident strides proclaiming they belonged. Maya didn't feel like she belonged. Not here. She checked her phone again. The message from Professor Harmon remained unchanged. Assistant conductor position. Open. Need replacement immediately. Come audition today, 2 p.m. Her palms dampened. At 28, Maya had never conducted anything larger than community orchestras and university ensembles. The Metropolitan Symphony was another universe entirely. One, populated by graduates from Juilliard and Curtis, not state university music programs like hers. You're blocking the entrance, a sharp voice cut through her thoughts. Maya stepped aside quickly, almost stumbling. Sorry, But the man was already past her, carrying a violin case and trailing an air of expensive cologne. He disappeared through the grand entrance without a backward glance. Inside, the lobby buzzed with pre-rehearsal energy. Musicians, clustered in conversation, their instruments temporarily forgotten. Maya approached the security desk, her steps hesitant. I'm here for the assistant conductor audition, she said. Professor Harmon asked me to come. The security guard raised an eyebrow. ID? She fumbled for her university faculty card, where she taught introductory music theory 3 evenings a week. He glanced at it dismissively. Wait here. 5 minutes, stretched to 15. Maya shifted her weight from foot to foot, aware of curious glances from passing musicians. Her simple black pants and button-down shirt felt woefully inadequate among the sea of designer labels. Ms. Chen, a thin woman with silver-streaked hair, appeared. I'm Margaret, Professor Harmon's assistant. Follow me. They wound through backstage corridors until they reached a small room where 3 people sat at a table. Maya recognized Professor Harmon immediately. His stern face had graced numerous classical music magazines. Beside him sat an elegant woman, whose perfect posture suggested years of disciplined training, and a younger man with intense eyes and a skeptical expression. This is Maya Chen, Margaret announced before departing. Professor Harmon nodded without warmth. Ms. Chen, this is Elise Vandermark, our concertmaster, and Julian Reeves, our principal violist and board member. Thank you for the opportunity, Maya began. Julian interrupted. Professor Harmon mentioned you conduct the Riverside Community Orchestra. Forgive me, but I'm not familiar with them. Heat crept up Maya's neck. It's small. We perform 4 concerts annually. And you teach at... Elise trailed off, examining Maya's resume with thinly veiled skepticism. Westlake College, music theory and appreciation. Julian exchanged a glance with Elise. Interesting choice, Professor Harmon. We're in a bind, Professor Harmon replied. Our assistant conductor broke his wrist yesterday. We have 3 weeks until the autumn gala. Still, Julian muttered, just loud enough for Maya to hear. Professor Harmon sighed. Ms. Chen, our situation is this. We need someone to assist with rehearsals and potentially step in if needed. You come recommended by an old colleague, but this orchestra operates at the highest level. I understand, Maya said, though her throat felt tight. You may observe today's rehearsal from the audience. Tomorrow we'll have you conduct a short segment as an audition. The piece is Mahler's Fifth. I assume you're familiar with it. Yes, Maya answered, though her experience with the piece was mostly academic. She'd analyzed it, studied it, loved it, but never conducted it with a professional orchestra. Good. Tomorrow at 10 then. Professor Harmon dismissed her with a nod. As Maya walked out, she heard Julian's voice. This is absurd. She doesn't have the pedigree for this orchestra. She quickened her pace, pretending she hadn't heard. The observation seats were empty, except for a few patrons who had connections enough to watch rehearsals. Maya sat near the back, pulling out her worn copy of the Mahler score. As the musicians assembled on stage, she noticed a tall figure striding confidently toward the podium. Darius Keller, the renowned principal conductor. Whispers around her confirmed his legendary status. Graduated from Vienna's elite conservatory at 19. Conducted Berlin Philharmonic at 25. 3 Grammy Awards. Her heart sank further. What was she doing here? The orchestra fell silent as Keller raised his baton. What followed was magic. The Mahler bloomed under his direction, each phrase breathing with life. Maya watched his every movement, how he cued sections with subtle gestures, how he shaped dynamics with the angle of his wrist. His technique was impeccable, but it was something else that held her spellbound, the connection between him and the musicians, an invisible current of understanding. During a break, Maya slipped out to find a restroom. As she rounded a corner, she nearly collided with a group of musicians. "Sorry," she murmured, trying to step around them. "You're the community orchestra person," one said, a cellist she recognized from the rehearsal. "The emergency replacement." Maya nodded uncomfortably. "Bold move, attempting this jump," another musician commented. "Though I can't imagine you'll be doing much actual conducting." "Harmon's just desperate," the cellist said. "Rumor has it, Darius refused to work with any of the conservatory graduates on his list. I heard she was someone's student," a third voice added, as if Maya wasn't standing right there. She excused herself and hurried away, their laughter following her down the corridor. In the restroom, Maya splashed cold water on her face. The mirror reflected her uncertainty back at her. She'd been conducting since she was 16, when her high school teacher had first put a baton in her hand. She'd worked with community groups, while others her age chased prestigious positions. She'd chosen teaching over performing, practicality over dreams, but there had always been something inside her, a deep, instinctive understanding of how music should flow. Her old professor had called it a gift. Here, it felt like an inadequate offering. "They're not wrong, you know," she whispered to her reflection. "You don't belong here." But another voice, one that had guided her through difficult choices before, whispered back, "Then show them where you do belong." Maya returned to the hall just as rehearsal resumed. She opened her score and lost herself in Mahler's world, making notes, feeling the music in her bones. By the time the session ended, her score was filled with markings and observations. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice Professor Harmon approaching. "Preparing for tomorrow?" he asked, startling her. "Yes," she answered, closing the score. "The third movement's transitions will need particular attention." He studied her with new interest. "Most conductors focus on the adagietto first. It's the showpiece. The foundation is built in the third movement," she replied without thinking. "The emotional architecture of the piece depends on how those transitions are handled." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps. "Be ready at 10, he said, before walking away. That night, Maya barely slept. She reviewed the score until her eyes burned, watching recordings of different interpretations, moving her hands in silent conduction. At dawn, she gave up on sleep entirely and headed back to the hall, arriving hours early. The stage was empty, the seats vacant. Maya stood at the foot of the stage, absorbing the vastness of the space, then slowly climbed the steps to the podium. She placed her score on the stand, raised her arms and began conducting to an imaginary orchestra, losing herself in the music that played in her mind. She didn't hear the door open or notice the figure standing in the shadows, watching. At precisely 10, the orchestra members filed in. Maya stood awkwardly to the side as they warmed up. Professor Harmon appeared with Elise and Julian, followed by Darius Keller himself. "Ms. Chen will conduct the third movement," Professor Harmon announced. "Please give her your full attention." Whispers swept through the orchestra. Maya felt dozens of skeptical eyes upon her as she took the podium. "The third movement?" Julian said loudly. "That's rather ambitious for an audition, isn't it?" "It's what she prepared," Professor Harmon replied. Maya placed her score on the stand, hands trembling slightly. She looked out at the orchestra, some of the finest musicians in the country, all waiting for her to fail. "From measure 100, please," she said, surprised at the steadiness in her voice. She raised her baton. The silence felt oppressive. Her downbeat was tentative, and the sound that emerged was lackluster. The woodwinds entered late. Someone in the brass section played a wrong note. "Stop," Julian called out. "Perhaps something simpler would be more appropriate." Maya's face burned. "May I try again, please?" Professor Harmon nodded curtly. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes briefly, and forced herself to forget everything except the music. When she opened them again, she raised her baton with newfound resolution. This time, her downbeat was clear, her gestures precise. The orchestra responded with professional detachment, playing correctly but without engagement. They reached a particularly complex section where different themes intertwined. Maya heard the lower strings faltering, losing the counter-melody. She directed her attention toward them, mouthing the rhythm, her left hand drawing out the phrase while her right maintained the primary beat. Slowly, something began to change. The cellos found their footing. The brass entered with newfound confidence. By the time they reached the climax of the movement, the sound had transformed from mere notes into music. But then, disaster struck. In a moment of overconfidence, Maya attempted a dramatic gesture, and her baton slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. Titters erupted from the orchestra. Julian made a show of checking his watch. Red-faced, Maya bent to retrieve the baton, hearing Julian mutter, "Amateur hour is over. We have work to do." "That will be all, Ms. Chen," Professor Harmon said, not unkindly. "We'll be in touch." Maya nodded, gathered her score, and fled the podium. As she hurried down the side aisle, she heard the orchestra tuning up again, already moving on from her embarrassment. She spent the rest of the day in a coffee shop 6 blocks away, too mortified to go home, where she'd have to explain everything to her roommate. When her phone rang that evening, she almost didn't answer, expecting rejection. "Ms. Chen," Professor Harmon's voice sounded strained. "Can you come to tomorrow's rehearsal? Darius is ill, and we need someone to run sections while I work with the soloists." Stunned, Maya agreed. The next morning, she arrived to find the orchestra in disarray. Professor Harmon quickly pulled her aside. "Work with the strings on the second movement for an hour," he instructed. "Just keep them busy and productive. I'll handle the woodwinds and brass separately." Julian approached, face like thunder. "This is absurd. I could easily conduct this section myself." "You're needed with the viola section," Professor Harmon replied, firmly. "Ms. Chen will conduct." Maya took the podium, acutely aware of Julian's glare and the string section's reluctance. She cleared her throat. "Let's start with measure 42. Her confidence grew as they worked, despite the string player's initial resistance. When she suggested a different bowing for a difficult passage, she saw a few curious glances. "Try connecting these 4 notes as one gesture," she demonstrated with her hand. "Then separate the next phrase like a question and answer." A young violinist tried it and looked surprised at the result. Others followed. "That actually works," someone murmured. By the end of the hour, even Julian had stopped openly scowling, though he made a point of correcting her terminology once. "It's not sweeping, it's arpeggiated," he said after she described a passage. "Yes, arpeggiated," Maya agreed, refusing to be baited. As the days passed, Maya continued assisting with rehearsals. Darius remained absent, rumored to be battling severe bronchitis. With the gala approaching, tension mounted. Maya worked tirelessly, her initial mistakes forgotten as she proved herself useful, if not fully accepted. Then, 3 days before the gala, catastrophe struck. "Darius has pneumonia," Professor Harmon announced grimly to the assembled orchestra. "He's been hospitalized and cannot conduct the gala." Shocked murmurs spread through the room. "I'll be taking over the main program," he continued. "Ms. Chen will assist and conduct the opening piece." "Absolutely not," Julian exploded. "The gala is our most important fundraiser. Board members and major donors will be there. We cannot have someone of her background representing this orchestra." Elise nodded in agreement. "It's too risky, Professor." "Do you have a better suggestion?" Professor Harmon demanded. "Every qualified conductor is booked this weekend." "I'll conduct the opening myself," Julian insisted. "You haven't prepared it," Professor Harmon countered. "Neither has she properly," Julian shot back. Maya, who had been standing silently nearby, stepped forward. "I've studied every piece in the program," she said quietly. "I've conducted the opening with the second violins and cellos during sectionals twice now." Julian scoffed. "Sectionals aren't the same as a gala performance." "Ms. Chen will conduct the opening piece," Professor Harmon declared, ending the argument. "Now, let's get back to work." The evening of the gala arrived with suffocating pressure. Maya stood, backstage in the simple black dress she'd splurged on, modest compared to the designer gowns glimpsed among the audience. but the best she could afford. Julian approached, immaculate in his tuxedo. "I spoke with the board president," he said. Without preamble, "If you embarrass us tonight, your career in this city is over. I'll personally see to it." Before Maya could respond, Professor Harmon called the orchestra to attention. "Places in 5 minutes." The opening piece was Beethoven's Coriolan Overture, dramatic, intense, and mercifully brief at about 8 minutes. But those would be the longest 8 minutes of Maya's life. As she waited to go on, she closed her eyes and remembered why she'd fallen in love with conducting in the first place. Not for recognition or prestige, but for that perfect moment when individual musicians transformed into a single breathing entity under her guidance. "It's time," Professor Harmon said. Maya walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. Polite applause greeted her appearance, tinged with curious whispers. She bowed briefly, then took her place at the podium. The orchestra sat at attention before her, faces revealing varying degrees of resignation, concern, and in Julian's case, barely concealed contempt. She raised her baton. The hall fell silent. For a heartbeat, doubt paralyzed her. Then she recalled the words of her first conducting teacher. "Your job isn't to show off. It's to serve the music." Maya brought down her baton with quiet authority. The first chords exploded, with controlled fury exactly as she had imagined them. The orchestra, perhaps surprised by her suddenly commanding presence, responded instinctively. The dramatic opening gave way to the plaintive second theme, which Maya shaped with subtle gestures, drawing unexpected tenderness from the strings. They navigated through the overture's conflicting emotions. Maya forgot about Julian, forgot about the audience, forgot about everything except the conversation she was having with the orchestra through her hands. She didn't just conduct the notes, she told a story, Beethoven's story, with every motion of her body. When they reached the final diminuendo, Maya drew out the fading notes with such control that the audience seemed to collectively hold its breath, hanging on the silence that followed. Only when the last echo died away did reality return. There was a moment of stunned silence, then thunderous applause. Maya turned and bowed, glimpsing faces in the orchestra that registered shock, respect, and in some cases, outright amazement. Julian sat rigid, his expression unreadable. "Professor." Harmon entered to take over the remainder of the program, giving Maya a slight nod as they passed each other. It might have been her imagination, but she thought she saw approval in his eyes. Backstage, Maya trembled with leftover adrenaline. She had done it. Not perfectly, perhaps, but authentically, Ms. Chen. She turned to find an elderly man with a distinguished air standing nearby. "I'm Walter Kingsley," he said, "board chairman." Maya's heart sank. Had Julian already complained? "That was remarkable conducting," he continued. "I understand you've been assisting during Darius's illness. Where did you study?" "Westlake College," she admitted. "It's not prestigious, but, my dear, just now you showed exactly why credentials aren't everything," he interrupted with a smile. "You have an unusual gift, raw in places certainly, but genuine." "Thank you," Maya said, uncertain how to respond. "The West Side Youth Symphony has been looking for a new music director," he said. "It's a paid position with a decent orchestra, students and young professionals. Would you be interested?" Maya stared at him, speechless. "I sit on their board as well," he explained. "We need someone who can develop young talent, not just drill them in technique. Someone like you." Yes," Maya managed. "I'd be very interested." "Excellent. We'll be in touch." He handed her a card and walked away. Maya sat alone in a quiet corner as the main concert proceeded, the music washing over her. Everything had changed in 8 minutes, not because she had proven Julian wrong, but because she had finally proven herself right. 6 months later, Maya stood before the West Side Youth Symphony, baton raised. The past half-year had been transformative. Her appointment had raised eyebrows initially, but her work with the young musicians had silenced critics. Attendance at their concerts had increased steadily. She was still not the most technically perfect conductor in the city, but her interpretations drew listeners in, and her rapport with her musicians brought out performances few had thought possible from a youth orchestra. Remember what we discussed, she told them before beginning. This music isn't about showing off, it's about connecting with each other and with something larger than ourselves. From the audience, Professor Harmon watched with interest. He had attended several of her concerts now, occasionally offering constructive criticism that Maya welcomed. Julian had never acknowledged her success, but Elise had surprised her by attending a performance and offering genuine congratulations. Afterward, as Maya brought down her baton and music filled the hall, she realized she had found where she belonged, not in the spotlight of prestigious orchestras, but here nurturing the next generation of musicians, helping them discover their own voices. The path that had seemed a disappointment had led her exactly where she needed to be. Sometimes talent finds its purpose in unexpected places, and sometimes the first seat we claim is the one that was waiting for us all along.